He is. He is. Hey, I wouldn't trade the positions.
No, I know. You guys were the greatest.
No, no.
Yeah, no. You guys are. There's been no equal. I can tell you. Although I got to give it to the young men and women today.
Oh man.
They are dynamite. Let me tell you. Yeah.
Those SEALs and Special Forces. That
Oh yeah. Well,
I won't have any part of that.
these young kids today, they're pretty damn good. So.
Yeah, they are.
You guys were still the greatest, though.
No, no.
I like to think of there was a few of those World II guys probably teaching you guys what to do.
There was, believe me, there was a lot of.
continuity.
I had a couple of sergeant majors and master sergeants in the Army that were from World War II, and boy, you didn't mess around with those guys.
No. Stand clear, that's for
That's
sure.
right. Clear the deck, right?
Yeah,
that's
clear the deck.
Carry on.
Yeah.
Carry on.
All right, we'll see you later.
So, yeah, Doug, just take it at your own pace, however you want to do it. And in fact, yeah, I'll just try and point the camera at you. And yeah, just speak in the microphone as best you can. But we'll get a good recording here, I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this is a display of the history of the USS Hadley, DD-774. I was aboard from the day it was commissioned on 25 November 1944 through the day it was decommissioned because it was no longer of any use to the Navy. And that decommissioning date was December 15th, 1945, just a little over a year after it was commissioned. So it was essentially a brand new ship. New destroyers today are expected to last about 30 years. We lasted 1 year, because, in fact, less than that, because we were damaged so bad we couldn't function about 6 months after we were commissioned. The ship looked like this when it was commissioned. Brand new ship, beautiful, and the ship during or as a result of the battle was over here by diagram, and this diagram shows the 3 aircraft which came in to hit us. The first one hit us at the waterline in Okinawa and raised the keel underneath the ship 56 inches. And when the keel is raised up like that into the engineering spaces, both shafts were broken. The reduction gears were destroyed. This plane here exploded as it hit the ship at the waterline. It dislodged a 500-pound bomb which went underneath the ship and exploded underneath. That's the one that raised the keel up inside. The second plane to hit was one here which came through the rigging here and took out a lot of antenna and wiring supports for the smokestacks and crashed in the water just beside the ship. The third and final hit was a plane which dove in on top of a 40 millimeter quad mount. It's 4 40 millimeter gun mounts on one swiveling mount, and it was on the second deck up. And it crashed onto that with such force that the bomb it was carrying exploded. It blew the mount off its base and into the ocean. And that was the site, of course, killing all of our men who were associated with that mount. It then burned right straight through and crashed into all the officers' quarters, which were here on the main deck, just underneath the gun mount, more or less. And that's where I had all my stuff, and of course I lost everything I had except for that which I was wearing. My battle station was up here in Combat Information Center on the second deck. That's on the 01 level, as they call it, just below and behind the bridge, because all the radars were in that section. And the communications were right next to us in the radio shack, and the submarine detection equipment was here just forward of us. So and the bridge, and there's your control of the entire ship. There was nothing left to control after we lost all our propulsion. The shafts broken here were driven aft, and one of the screws here was jammed because it was hit by the end of the shaft as it came out. And rudders, I'm sorry. One of the rudders was destroyed. And so we were helpless, hopeless mess. And we were towed from there into a small island off of Okinawa called Ieshima to find out how bad was the damage. And I sent a diver down underneath, and he came up with a terrible report about this hump on the keel, and that sort of set the pace for the ship for the future. We were then towed into the Kamikaze Islands, just southwest of Okinawa, and were patched up in time. We took our turn into getting into a dry dock, a floating dry dock in the Kamikaze Islands. And there we were patched up. The holes in the bottom were sealed off. This hole inside where the airplane went in at the water line, that was covered with a big sheet of steel and welded on there. So the ship was then watertight, but still could not propel itself. Eventually, we were towed from those group of islands to San Francisco Naval Shipyard. It took 3 days, less than 2 months under tow. And shortly after we left Okinawa, on our way to our first stop in Saipan, we went through a typhoon. And that typhoon is something I care not ever to see again. I would rather go through the battle again than through the typhoon. Ships were lost and sunk to the bottom with all hands during that typhoon, but we were fortunate enough that the catenary for the tow line from the tug to the ship is a very, very long tow line. It was lengthened even more than normal so that it would sink deep into the ocean, and we moved extremely slowly through the water so as not to stretch that catenary tow line. If the tow line broke, we were done, because in a storm like that, in a typhoon, the ship would automatically turn sideways due to the wave action, and once you get sideways, you would capsize within minutes. But that never happened. The tow line between between Okinawa and San Francisco broke 9 times, but not once during the typhoon, or I wouldn't be standing here today. And took several hours to half a day sometimes to patch the tow line, and the tow line consisted of anchor chain fed out from our ship, from the bow of our ship, connected to steel cable, which was paid out by the tug, and those links had to be put back together again, and it took several hours generally to do that. But 9 times it broke, and we were fortunate not once during the typhoon. This map here will show you the location of Japan and the Okinawa Islands, and then there's Formosa in the Philippines, so you can orient yourself to see where they all are. But we made a trip from Okinawa to Saipan and back, hauling Marines back and forth to Okinawa. And then that was our first stop on our way home later on. And we stopped at Saipan, and then Eniwetok, and then Pearl Harbor, and then San Francisco Naval Shipyard. 2 months under tow. These are statistics on the forces who were there, and I have 40 aircraft carriers, for example. 40 aircraft carriers, 365 amphibious ships, 18 battleships. It's a pretty big battle. Most of that is to hopefully destroy the forces on Okinawa before the landing took place. Other pictures of interest here. This is a plaque, which actually I designed myself, totally myself. This plaque is for the Hadley, and it is embedded in the wall of the National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas. The National Museum of the Pacific War is in Fredericksburg because, well, it's a very tiny town, a main street and one or two side streets, and that's it. But it happens to be the birthplace of five-star Admiral Nimitz. Admiral Nimitz was born there. His father was born there. The family owned the hotel in town. It is still there. It's no longer a hotel because it's been turned into the museum for Admiral Nimitz. However, land was purchased adjacent to the hotel shortly after the war, and it grew into the National Museum of the Pacific War, and it's a beautiful place to visit. And if you are interested in in the battles of all the Pacific, that's the place to go to learn about them the best. They have a lot of information there. And of course, this ship, the USS Hadley, has a major display. This photo here is a photo of the gun mount, which the 40 millimeter gun mount. There's the four barrels right there. And that gun mount is the one which was blown up and lost at sea by the third plane which hit us. This picture was taken during a practice session on the way to Okinawa. This here is a piece of the aluminum, whatever it is, a piece of the meatball. That's the Japanese symbol, which is all solid red, and that's solid red, but it darkened because of the heat that it took when it burned. That is clipped from the plane which went into the side of the ship at the waterline. This photo here is a photo of Mrs. UW Hadley about to strike the bow of the ship with a bottle of champagne when it was commissioned in earlier '44. And over here are pictures of the damage on the top side. This top photo shows a geared ring, which is right there. The geared ring is the mounting ring on which this gun mount here sat and turned, a geared ring. But the gun mount's gone because it was blown into the ocean by the bomb. Here we have Christmas time aboard the Hadley, Christmas of 1944 in San Diego. And these are some of the officers who were aboard at that time. That's me there, a young whippersnapper, and some of my friends here, and we didn't lose any of those folks there, very thankfully. This is a photo here of the final decommissioning ceremony party, which we held in San Francisco. Another couple of the officers and I went out and hired the American Legion Hall in upper Market Street area of San Francisco, and they let us have our party there that